All right, hello everybody. Thank you so much for coming along for this lichen tour today on this afternoon. We have some really lovely weather to look at some lichens. We're going to do a little bit of standing around talking about Lichen 101 right here before we get moving, before we get going. And then we'll spend the rest of the tour, we'll start right here in Magnolia Plaza. Some of the trees here were planted in the early 20th century, so there's some pretty great lichen development. And then we'll walk down towards the Japanese Hill and Pond Garden. And then from there, we'll walk across BBG and make our way slowly to the Rock Garden, which is a New York City lichen hotspot. And we'll have lots of time for exploration over there with your hand lenses and looking at the lichens there. And then we'll make our way back and we'll end at the base of these stairs right here. But a little bit about lichens before we get started. So at its most basic, I have this diagram of a lichen right here. At its most basic, a lichen is sort of the living, ongoing partnership between a fungus and an alga, so a type of algae, and they live together. They form one unified body, and they have a symbiotic relationship, a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. So they're both benefiting from this partnership. The alga is photosynthetic, so it makes sugars, it makes carbohydrates just like plants do, and it gives those sugars to the fungus. In exchange, the fungus provides a place to live, provides water, and together they make this very unified body. So that's lichens in a nutshell. That definition gets a little bit muddied because, as we'll talk later, sometimes it's not necessarily an alga that's part of it. Sometimes there's a third partner, a fourth partner. But at its most basic, it's that ongoing partnership with those two very distinct organisms. Lichens come in three growth forms. Generally, we're talking about three growth forms with lichens. You have them listed on your sheets of paper. There are some other growth forms to this. It's on the front sheet with the three pictures on the bottom. It says crustose, foliose, and fruticose. There are other descriptors. There's like squamulose and leprose and gelatinous and all sorts of much more technical in the weeds names for lichen growth forms. But at its most, the most basic ones, crustose, foliose, fruticose. So with the crustose lichens, those are the ones that form a crust on the thing they're growing on the substrate. And so it would be pretty much impossible to remove a crustose lichen without also removing the substrate as well. Then with the foliose lichens, those are the ones that form leafy lobes. They have a very leafy appearance to them. You can think foliose, foliage, to remember that. And then with the fruticose lichens, those are the ones that grow out in three directions. So they might be bushy, shrubby, hairy, but those are fruticose lichens. We will start off with looking closely at some crustose lichens. We do have some specimens of fruticose lichens. I don't know where that bag ended up actually, but there is a bag of some fruticose specimens that we can hand out so you can see those. And we will also be seeing a fruticose lichen on the tour, but I will say they're very rare in New York City to encounter them, because fruticose lichens tend to be the most sensitive to air pollution, and we'll talk more about what lichens have to do with air pollution in the first place. Everybody has a hand lens also, and to use a hand lens, the way I like to do it is put it up to my eye, and then I bring the thing I'm trying to look at into focus. So whether that means I'm moving my head or I'm moving the thing, and you'll sort of get to a sweet spot where it focuses, and you'll be able to see fine details with your hand lens. The other thing that I sometimes see people do, if it's not comfortable for you to hold it up to your eye, is to put it down at the thing you're trying to look at, get it to focus there, and then you can kind of see, it's a little bit of a smaller field of vision for yourself, but you can kind of see it focus and not have to be so close to it. So I want to turn our attention first to the crustose lichens that are on the railing here behind us. And you might have thought there's nothing here, but there are actually lichens on this railing. And we can sort of gather around it, and yeah, I'm noticing some of you are finding these little yellow patches over here. There's some little yellow discoloration. You gotta look closely. It's the part of the railing that's not quite the stone. another hand lens. I think we might have handed them all out. Yeah. But yeah, everyone can go along the railing and find one of these patches, and try using your hand lens. Get accustomed to using the hand lens and see if you can have some more detail come into focus. And you'll realize there's more than meets the eye when you first look at the railing. Over on this side too, you can come over. There's some flaky fire dots is the common name of one of the lichens over here. Hidden gold specks. I was seeing some hidden gold specks over there. Yeah.
Do they cause the material sometimes to swell? Or could it just be that there's a swelling on the material and they're just all over it?
Do they cause the material to swell? I think it might just actually be the lichens themselves with something this hard. Okay. I think it's the lichens themselves that you might be seeing that cause like a sort of like swelling appearance to it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'll use these specimens in a minute. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I can hold it.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
I can either say if you do not have a hand lens at this point, like please, we're gonna leave you behind at this point. This is the point.
Yeah. I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
With this amount of people, I think it'll be fine. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. I think it'll be okay. When we get to like the rock garden and stuff, I think it might not be as like. Yeah, we'll just spread out. Okay. Yeah.
It's not moss?
What was the question? Sorry.
How do I know what I'm looking at? It's not moss.
Yeah, how do you know it's not moss? So moss has, sometimes it's very hard to tell. Sometimes moss has like a appearance that looks a lot like lichens, but generally moss is greener and it has more of like that fuzzy carpet appearance. I did want to show real quick, we're going to hop from crustose to fruticose. Fruticose lichens, you can see this is an example of fruticose lichens. These came from a horticultural display that we had in the winter here. They're not from New York City, but they have that sort of like shrubby, bushy look to them, as you can see. Yeah, they grow out in 3 dimensions. So that's the fruticose lichens, rarer to find in New York City. And then we'll walk along over here and I'll show you all a very clear example of a foliose lichen, and one of the most like commonly seen ones in the city right here is the common green shield lichen on this magnolia tree. You can see it on the bend of the branch right there, and you kind of will see those all over New York City, which is really cool because they do tend to be sensitive to air pollution, so the fact that we see them all over the city is a great sign. And they have this sort of like yellow-green appearance. They're kind of your quintessential foliose lichen. And if you've seen it, you can make space for others to come check it out too.
Did you have the name?
Yeah, that's the common green shield lichen.
The common
green shield, like a shield for protection.
Okay.
Common green shield. Yeah. Yeah, you can see it, a very clear little common green shield lichen there. And we can keep walking in this way.
How does the tree feel about it?
How does the tree feel about the lichen? So the general consensus is that the lichens have no negligent, they don't harm the tree. Yeah, is what the common knowledge is. Which is funny because a lot of people will ask like, oh, there's lichens on my tree, how do I get rid of them? And they don't tend to harm the tree, they just kind of use the tree as a place to sit. You'll also see, like as we walk, you'll see some of this like yellow, sort of dusty looking lichen. If you look closely at it, we'll see some more as we walk. Looks like it could be crustose lichen, but if you look closely, it is foliose. It has leafy lobes on it. That's a very common lichen you'll see in the city. Also the candle flame lichen, Candelaria concolor. It's got this very beautiful yellow color. It turns like a vibrant, almost like a vibrant green when it's wet. And you can see it all here too. Yeah, we'll see some better examples of it where it's a little bit closer. Yeah, lots of lichens here in Magnolia Plaza. I'll be doing my best to walk backwards, so if I miss any like big cool lichens behind me, please feel free to spot them out. Lichens are very diverse growth forms. There are at least 20,000 known species of lichens on the planet. I suspect that there are many more than that. And in North America, we have 3,600 lichen species. Oh, you can see some great lichen growth up here.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very beautiful.
Is that old or new?
That lichen must be pretty old. Yeah, it looks like a Punctelia lichen to me. It's got that like gray-green color. It looks like rough speckled shield, which we'll be seeing more of in the Japanese garden.
How'd you know it's old?
Because it's pretty big, and lichens grow very slowly, generally speaking. I mean, there's a variable growth rate for lichens, but we're usually talking around like a millimeter a year, or like the length of the tip of your fingernail for a lot of the lichens that we see in the city. There's like variation in that, of course, but when you look at a lichen that big, you can like guess that it was probably growing for a long while. It could have also been like distinct lichens that like grew so much that they kind of like came together. And so it might be giving like a false appearance of one giant lichen, but it actually started out as smaller ones. But yeah, we have around 3,600 lichen species in North America. But I suspect that number is also much higher.
And do you know how many here in the Botanic
Yes, well, in the Botanical Garden, I'm not sure. In New York, we have over 100, just over 100. But the interesting thing about lichen species, when we're talking about species of lichens, excuse the feedback, when we're talking about lichen species, we're talking about the fungi in the lichen. So it's a little bit unfair to the photosynthetic partner that we're taxonomically organizing them by the fungal species. So we're kind of leaving out the complexity of the fact that lichens also have this other organism that is part of it when we're talking about how we're identifying it. We'll see some cool lichens coming up here. So you might be wondering, like, why lichens also? Like, why would a fungus and an algae, live like this? Hi, Sonu.
I think your group might be getting a little
Split up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll wait up first for the folks over there. And I'll talk a bit about, like, the lichen lifestyle, why a fungus might, why it would be a lichen in the first place. So lichens, or fungi, are like us in that they're heterotrophs, which just means that they need to eat other things to survive. They're not like plants where they can be generating their own food. And so all fungi have to figure out some way to get their nutrition needs met. Have we gotten our people? All right. So all fungi need to figure out a way to get their nutrition needs met. So many fungi are the saprotrophs, so that means that they just eat decaying matter, they eat the stuff that's decomposing. A lot of like our tasty mushrooms are that type of fungus, saprotrophic fungi. So shiitakes, chicken of the woods, oyster mushrooms, all of those are the decomposers. And then we've got the parasitic fungi. I'll also say there's overlap between all of these. The parasitic fungi will attack living things and rely on living things at a detriment to their host for their own nutrition. And then we've got the mutualistic symbiosis of fungi. Are we good to keep walking? Cool. Awesome. We'll keep heading towards the Japanese garden. So we have the mutualistic symbioses, and within those, the mutualistic symbioses, that just means that the fungus is partnering with something else and they're both benefiting from it. So it's not like a parasitic relationship where the thing that that is hosting the fungus is getting harmed in the process. The mutualistic symbiosis, they're both benefiting. So mycorrhizal fungi are one example of this, and I think they've gotten a lot of attention in the past couple years. Those are the fungi that partner with plants, and through the roots of the plants and the mycelium of the fungi, they exchange nutrients and resources, and it benefits both of the plants. Thank you. Benefits both of the organisms. And one example also of mutualistic symbiosis is a lichen. So for the lichenized fungi, those that chose the lichen lifestyle, it has just been evolutionarily advantageous to partner so closely with a photobiont. And that's just one reason why they live so closely together. They're both benefiting from it, and it's just one way to get their nutrition needs met. So we're going to come around here and we're going to see these trees that have some really awesome lichen growth on them. So this one you can see there's like some really big lichens right there. And we can keep walking along over to this tree down here too. You can see a massive like carpet of lichens on this weeping cherry tree. I really like the ones on this branch because it's like, where does one end and the other one begin? You know, it's kind of just this whole giant lichen.
It also looks like you can see alga. Is that true?
Yeah,
Like,
can
is
you
that
see
what that
alga?
is?
Do you mean the green,
Yeah,
the green stuff?
dark green
Yeah,
between the two, is that?
I think that's moss in this
Oh, it's
case.
just moss.
But there are certain instances like you'll see like a green, almost like a film on trees, and that can be free living algae if it's like in a place that gets moist enough and it's able to get its water needs met. You can also see free living algae on trees. So yeah, there's lots of stuff that could look like a lichen, even like chipping paint can look like a lichen, gum, bird poop. There's been times where I've seen bird poop and thought it was a lichen. It's not.
Moss and
Can't
the
get.
lichen interact at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're sometimes occupying the like exact same space. They seem that they coexist. I don't know how much interaction there would be. Perhaps, like, you know, it might be that the moss retains moisture in a way that could be beneficial to the lichen. But I'm really not sure what their level of interaction is, or if they're just together because they seem to benefit from the same sort of conditions. Then we can keep walking this way. I really like to look at the lichens on this tree because you can very clearly see the distinction between like a lichen described as yellow-green and a lichen described as like blue-gray. And that kind of just comes down to the differences in the chemicals that they produce. So you can see here, there's some, well, it's a little bit hard with the sun, but there's some lichens over here that are more of like a blue-gray color. And you can see some over here that are more of like a yellow-greenish color. That yellow-green color is due to usnic acid, which a lot of lichens produce. And this like grayish-greenish, this blue-gray color is due to atranorin. And one cool thing about lichens, I mean there are hundreds of cool things about lichens, but one cool thing about lichens is that they produce a lot of chemicals that are completely unique to lichens. Like I think there's something like, it's in the hundreds of chemicals that lichens produce that are not found in nature otherwise. And a lot of those have antimicrobial properties, or it might be acting almost as like a natural sunblock for the lichen. So usnic acid and atranorin give some of like those two like distinct lichen colors that you'll encounter a lot in like lichens of New York City, that sort of yellow-green or that sort of blue-gray color. And when we're done looking here, we can start making our way through this door. And I think I heard the beginning of a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Are lichen height-centric? Like, do they only grow to a certain, on branches at a certain height? Is there a certain height that they just won't grow?
So the question was, are lichens like height sensitive? Is there like a certain height where they won't grow or a certain height they prefer? I've seen lichens at all sorts of different heights, so I'm not sure. I don't think so. But certain lichen species might have a preference for maybe like more sunlight or less sunlight, and that might dictate how high up they're willing to grow. But I have seen lichens at the tops of very, very tall trees, and there are lichens that are on the ground. So generally, like when we're talking about lichens generally, they can grow all over. Yeah, another question.
When you were talking about the substance that can protect them
Yeah,
sun?
uh-huh.
And you talked earlier about how they need sun. Is that sort of for water maintenance or
Yes.
something else?
Yeah, lichens need sun because one of the partners in a lichen is photosynthesizing, and so it needs sunlight with the water in order to photosynthesize and produce those sugars. But at the same time, I imagine it also needs some sort of some lichens would need some sort of UV protection as to not get sunburnt. So there's probably like a certain balance there where like they have enough protection, but not too much where it's like blocking photosynthesis. Walking backwards is a very good mental exercise.
Tell it to a steady cam.
Right. Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, you're used to it. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about lichens and air pollution now. So lichens are, you know, on one hand very resilient. I'll wait for our folks to catch up a bit here. Lichens are on one hand very, very resilient, and on the other hand they can be pretty sensitive to air pollution. So lichens are breathing in with their whole body, and anything that lands on them, they can very easily and quickly accumulate to a level that could be deadly to them. And so when we have a lot of pollution in the air, it can be very toxic to lichens. And so lichens can act as a bioindicator, which just means that we can look to lichens to tell us things about our environment. So we can look to the types of lichens and quantities of lichens that grow in a given area to tell us how much pollution there is and what type of pollution there is. Because some lichens might be sensitive to acidic pollution, some lichens might be sensitive to pollution caused by like nitrogen-based fertilizers. I think we can keep walking. And so we can look at them and see, okay, there's a lot of this type of pollution in the area, or actually we're doing really good on this metric because this lichen showed up. And in New York City specifically, thankfully, we have a pretty positive story to tell when it comes to the lichens that we have in our area. I mentioned earlier, somebody asked how many lichens we have in New York City, and I said we have over 100 species of lichens now, which is a pretty great number compared to what it was just a few decades ago. There was a lichen survey performed in 1968 for New York City. Does anybody want to take a guess how many species there were of lichens in 1968 in New York City? You can just call out a number. 7? 15. It's closer to 7. It was 8. It was 8 species of lichens in 1968 in New York City. And now we have over 100. So we're on the right track. Yes, we have much cleaner air now, thank goodness. Yes, some good news. So you know, I like to dream and hope about a time in New York when there will be like hundreds of species of lichens. You can't go anywhere without like looking at so many lichens. You can hardly see anything else. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, it's a pretty positive story when it comes to that. But a bit on lichen resilience. There are lichens on every continent. There are lichens that got sent to space and got brought back to Earth, and they were still alive. They're very resilient life forms in some ways, and part of that is due to the fact that they can just go dormant when they need to. If they're not getting enough water, they'll just go dormant and they'll just hang out. And then when conditions are right again, they turn back on, so to speak, and the whole photosynthesis factory can start again. And they can just resume respiration and growth when it's suitable to do so.
Yeah,
And
if you see some big boulders up in the parks and state parks
Mhm.
in state New York, you see them very dry and different. And after it rains, it's so different.
yeah, totally. So someone up here is talking about how the lichens on these boulders look so different after it rains. And I will say, liking lichens makes you like rainy, gloomy days more. They're kind of like, in a way, it's kind of a gift if you're a lichen appreciator. When it's sort of a wet day, you can go outside and you can look at your typical lichen spots, and things will almost seem to be glowing, because lichens will take on a very different appearance when they're wet. And you can try this out also if you see a lichen, you get some water, you can spray the lichen, and you'll notice it can hydrate. It almost like grows. It swells as it fills up with water, and the color changes a bit too. So what's happening is the hyphae, these like fungal threads that make up the lichen, are letting in all this water and kind of expanding, and you can see the color of the alga better. You can see that green come through. Yeah.
So they physically merged. Is
Mhm.
that what happened? And so they create this third structure that's totally different than each of the individuals.
Right. Yeah. So the question is about like lichens physically merging, and that's exactly what's happening. Is they form a completely unified body, a thallus in lichen language, and the fungal hyphae. So hyphae is like the threads of a fungus, are really holding everything together. They're holding in place these algal cells. But yeah, they become such a unified body that like the algal cells are unrecognizable compared to how they are outside the lichen. Like it completely changes their expression, like the way that they appear, which makes it hard to identify the algae that are in a lichen, like down to the species level, because they look so different than they do outside of a lichen. I'll start complicating the definition of a lichen now. So in about 90% of lichens, the photosynthetic partner, the photobiont, is an alga. In the remaining 10%, it's a cyanobacterium is the primary photosynthetic partner. Cyanobacterial lichens will have a certain look to them. I love that people are looking at lichens back there. I'll slow us down a little bit. Cyanobacterial lichens will have a certain look to them. They can sometimes be a little more jelly looking. They'll have a more of like a grayish, blackish appearance sometimes. I don't think I've encountered any cyanobacterial lichens in New York City, but when you see a cyanobacterial lichen, it's like something's a little different here. Sometimes there are lichens that have both an alga and a cyanobacterium as partners, so there's like multiple photosynthetic partners. And then in many lichens also, there's like other fungi present. There will be a third yeast partner, or sometimes even a fourth fungal partner. So the idea of a lichen as just the one fungus and one alga, it gets a little muddied in reality. And I hear that there are actually, it's very hard to find a lichen that just follows that, two organisms and that's it. It's very hard to find a lichen that actually is just that.
What's the difference with moss?
So someone asked about moss. So moss is a plant. It's a non-vascular plant, so it doesn't have like vascular tissue. And lichens are not plants, even though they do photosynthesize. They're not plants themselves. And also the way that they are taxonomically organized by the species of the fungus, it would put them into the fungal kingdom technically. Yeah. So we're making our way to the rock garden now. At the rock garden, we'll each have some time to explore a bit on our own, and I'll also be around to answer questions. And then I want to point out a fruticose lichen that lives in the rock garden, my shining star, my little fruticose lichen that I was very excited to see was still around even after all the snow thawed. But yeah, that's where we're heading right now. Any other lichen questions? Yeah.
So do they, the fungi and the alga, can they exist separately also? And then if they are together they make a lichen, or?
Yeah, great question. So can the fungus and the alga exist separately? So in many cases, it seems like the alga can live without the fungus. And it seems like the fungus I don't know if I want to say always, because I feel like being a lichen appreciator also makes you realize that there's an exception for everything. But it seems like the fungus relies on this partnership a lot more than the alga usually does. So I think generally the fungus can't exist without the lichen form. Yeah. So we're entering the rock garden now. There's a lot of space in here, and there's also a lot of us, which is awesome. So please, feel free to spread out and take up the whole space that the rock garden has to offer. Find a lichen, take a close look at it, talk to a neighbor about it. What are you seeing? What's going on here? There are some lichens in the rock garden that are really, really colorful and loud and obvious, and some that are much more kind of hidden into the rock. Can almost look like part of the rock themselves. I also know that there is, bird poop on some of these rocks. Those are not lichens. Yeah, we have lots of space here. Do people cultivate lichens? I have not heard of anybody successfully growing lichens. I did hear of somebody trying to grow a lichen, and it not going well. But I also know of coworkers, excuse the wind, coworkers who are keeping like desktop lichens that they spray with water, and are like trying to keep them alive like little pets. Yeah, lots of space back here. Also, the witch hazel is gorgeous if anyone wants to take a whiff of that. It's like a fruticose lichen. That's so true. When you start framing lichens as the reference point for everything, and everything becomes like a lichen. Ooh, good question. Let's see.
Is this moss and this lichen? I don't know.
So that's moss, but that's a lichen.
Ah, okay.
And these little yellowish things, the little yellow recessed bits, those are lichens. And if you look even closer, you'll see there's like this very, like it's almost the color of the rock, but you'll see it has the leafy lobes. But there is actually, I'll turn my microphone on because there's a really cool example of a weird thing going on here. There's this like reddish color here. This is a lichen that's being attacked by a lichenicolous fungus. So what's happening there is there's another fungus that's coming in and attacking. It's parasitic. It's coming in and attacking the mycobiome in this lichen, and it's giving it this like orange color. I believe this is Erythraceum is the genus, but yeah, really, really weird thing going on. There's a bigger example somewhere down there because we saw it the other day, and I had to go and like remember what it was called. You can see a little bit more here, this sort of like pinkish color.
What is turning it red
I
or
think-
pink?
I don't know if it's the color of the parasitic fungus itself or like the substances it makes, but it's how you identify it. It's like it'll be on a lichen and it's this like pinkish, like salmony color.
You know what frogs eat?
What, did someone ask a question or no?
What did you study?
I was I did the culinary field.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is all not through
You're
school.
on the fungal end.
Yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
You've learned so much, haven't you?
I'm just obsessive. Yeah.
Yes. It's a great thing to
I-
be obsessed with.
I guess I never introduced myself also. So sorry about that. I was just so excited to get started, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people on this tour. So I'll do that now that we're like more than halfway through the tour. I'm Isabella. I work here at Brooklyn Botanic Garden. I'm one of the instructors in the Discovery Garden, which we're pretty close to right now, where we do all ages nature education. So we have school groups who come in. We've got little ones who come in. And when we say all ages, we really mean all ages. So always feel free to come through the Discovery Garden. And a lot of my love of lichens is actually started as some work that I did for the Discovery Garden a couple of years ago. But it's kind of taken over my mind since then. yeah, to a bit of an obsession. But yeah, I'm not a lichen expert. Someone asked if I studied this. Only in books at home and on websites and on Reddit and on forums and stuff. I did not go to school for this. But yeah, sorry for the late introduction. Yeah, any questions that are coming up?
Can you remind
Uh-huh.
us what you said about the two different colors? You said they're two different chemicals that they're forming?
Yes, yeah. So the two like main lichen colors, your go-to lichen colors will be like yellow-green or like this bluish grayish color.
They're all speckled.
Right, yeah, some of these are speckled and confused. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Confused. Why? I don't know why. Yeah, sometimes it's like multiple things going on at once and it's hard to tell. Like this one seems like way greener on the inside, but I would still, to me this is more gray-green than yellow, or sorry, gray-blue than like yellow-green, yeah. Some really good lichens back here too if you keep walking back here. Some very loud lichens. On the back of these sheets that everybody has also there are some like reproductive structures of lichens. So lichen reproduction is a whole can of worms. On your sheets you have 3 different structures. One of them is apothecia. That is an example of a sexual reproductive structure of the fungus. And we were seeing some good apothecia over here. Oh yeah, over there, down here. Apothecia looks like these like discs on lichens, and not all lichens will form it. But whenever you see these like dark discs on a lichen, it's the fungal component of the lichen releasing sexual spores. And this is like where it gets so crazy to me that this ever even happens at all. After that fungus spore goes off into the air, it needs to find its compatible photosynthetic partner. They need to find each other just like out in the wild to then come together and begin forming a lichen. So you can imagine that sexual reproduction for a lichen is very challenging. So a lot of lichens rely almost exclusively on asexual reproduction. And there are two examples of some asexual reproductive structures on your sheet as well. Those are Soredia and Isidia. Soredia will appear as like a sort of, it almost will look like a dust on a lichen, and if you touch a lichen, it even like rubs off on your fingers. And those are like ready-made lichen packets. They will be algal cells with fungal hyphae wrapped around it. So if they just brush off, whether it be on an animal or through wind, on fur, whatever, and they land somewhere else, they have everything that they need to just start growing a lichen again, much like propagating a plant. The other one that's on there is Isidia. Those are these little finger-like projections. You can see them with the naked eye, but they're even clearer with the hand lenses that some lichens produce. So they will be like extensions from the body of the lichen, and it'll be like a surface of a fungal hyphae, and within it the algal cells, and that can break off and same deal, just start growing a whole new lichen. And being able to tell the difference between Soredia and Isidia can allow you to identify like certain lichens, like some lichens will form one and not the other, for example. Some lichens will form apothecia and some almost never do, so it's cool to have under your belt these lichen terms. Yeah.
Trees or rocks or?
So the question is, do lichens prefer trees or rocks? Some lichens prefer rocks, some lichens prefer trees, but generally speaking, you can find lichens on anything that stays put long enough. So you'll find lichens. Somebody showed me pictures of lichens growing on a tire that was like outside for too long, and lichens started growing on it. They're all over the place. Yeah. Any other lichen questions?
Is that one an example of the apothecia that you
Yeah, you see these little like brown spots? Yeah, I encourage you if you can like go here or find some other apothecia. There might be some around here. Oh yeah, right here there's some really big one. This lichen is having, yeah, really, really big apothecia. You can get close to that. Let me see if I can find more over here. Oh, there's like great lichens back here. I didn't come back here earlier. Oh yeah, over here, if anyone wants to come look at this, like, the massive apothecia on this lichen over here. Not sure why this is yelling so much, but apologies for...
Does it affect the plants or the rocks or anything that it's on?
Yeah, so the question was, do lichens affect the plants or the rocks, or like what they're on? So the consensus is that lichens on plants, like when they're growing on trees, for example, aren't harming the trees. Like they're just using them as a place to sit. Lichens on rocks over time, they can help like weather the rocks, and so over time they can turn that rock into soil, but it would be like over a long, long time. But yeah, in that regard, lichens act as a pioneer species, so they'll sometimes be like the first thing to grow in an area where nothing's growing, there's just rocks, and they can come and eventually make it so that other things could grow on there. Yeah. While we're over here, I'll point out the fruticose lichen. So I was really excited to find this fruticose lichen here because I've only ever seen, in New York City, I've seen fruticose lichen at Greenwood Cemetery, this like very, very teeny tiny little usnea lichen. It was like about a centimeter big. I saw some fruticose lichens up at NYBG in the woods there. I've seen fruticose lichens in our bonsai collection, funny enough, because some of those trees, those little bonsai trees are so old, and I guess have had good air indoors, so there's some fruticose growth on some of those bonsai. But I did also find these little fruticose lichens. Okay, that made it worse. Is that better?
Sometimes if I move the cable around, it helps.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
doing great.
thanks.
There's no
Yeah. It has its own things to say as well. But if you come around, and everyone can we can sort of do a little line and come say hello, meet the celebrity. You'll see it's growing right here in this crevice, and I won't bend over because that seems to make this whole beeping thing worse. But there's also moss there, so it's kind of hard to tell what's lichen and what's moss. The moss has more of like a green plant appearance to it. The lichen has more of like a bluish, tealish, seafoam green thing going on. And you'll see these little projections. So if you're able and you would like to take a squat and get close to it, you can see these fingers that are sticking up on this lichen here. I believe it's in the Cladonia genus, but it's kind of hard to tell beyond that exactly what it is. But I love it. I love that it's still here. I was nervous after the winter with like all the snow and stuff, and I get nervous every time I see a very large group come through the rock garden. Like, oh my gosh, someone could very easily step on this lichen. But thankfully, it's been growing here for like a year. It's right in this crevice. Yes, exactly there. Yep, that's right there.
Over there, I saw on this little nest, there was almost like a barnacle looking.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Sometimes they'll have that sort of like barnacle appearance to it. Yeah, really cool stuff. Oh, hi, Romy.
What's the difference between moss and lichen? Like
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah, someone someone asked this as we were walking over here. So moss is a plant, and so it's a non-vascular plant, so it can't get very tall because it doesn't have vascular tissue, and so it just like kind of it forms this little carpet, but it is still a plant. And then with a lichen, you have a fungal component to it, so a totally different kingdom from plants, and either some sort of algae or cyanobacteria, and they're forming this like unified body together.
And algae isn't a plant?
Green algae's in the plant kingdom technically, which I just learned and blew my mind, but it's like not like a true proper plant itself, I guess. Like, also we love to put stuff in, organize it and label it, but technically, yeah, not quite a plant. But moss and lichens are often like on the exact same area. Like they tend to like the same conditions. Yeah.
Can you tell what, like, use it as directionally? Like, does it grow on one
Ooh,
side?
can you use lichens directionally? I wish I could. Lower?
Does it grow on
Yeah,
one
okay,
side?
cool.
Like more likely on trees.
Yeah, because there's like that saying that moss grows on the north side of trees, which I don't know if that's true because I feel like I see moss growing all over the place. Yeah, and I think that's the same. It might be the same deal with lichens. Yeah, but I haven't.
Grow in like morning versus mid, like certain time of day.
I'm not sure. It might be like even species specific depending on what their like what the sunlight desires of a specific lichen species could be. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I generally speaking, I see lichens in all directions. Sides. Yeah, on all sides. Yeah. But I mean, as we've seen, like even on like one tree, sometimes lichens will favor a certain side or even like a certain crevice. Like it might like a certain crevice where it seems like, okay, this area seems to collect water more. This area seems to get sunlight a little bit more. So it does have some preferences. And some lichens will have like preference for, can you all still hear me? Can everyone hear me okay? Some lichens will have preference for like a specific bark texture or like a specific pH that only a certain type of rock composition can provide. So you will see that level of specificity with some lichens, but there's enough lichens, I think, to cover like all conditions. We can start making our way out of the rock garden, and if you haven't yet seen our Frutico star, make sure to take a peek there. And we'll start slowly making our way back. I want to talk a little bit about lichens in the ecosystem, lichens beyond just themselves. Lichens get used by a lot of little creatures. There are nematodes and tardigrades that live within lichens, so we're talking down to the very microscopic. And then beyond that, we get bigger. There might be ants that live within lichens. Last year, I had this really cool experience of staring at a lichen on a tree, and it started moving. It was a lacewing larva, actually. It was the larva of the lacewing. Will often use lichen as camouflage. It will put lichen on its back, and you'll see it walking around on trees, and it will be camouflaged to be able to attack its prey better and not be seen as it comes along. We can hang out here as we wait for our friends to look at the Frutico star. So that's one example of lichens in ecology. There's also birds that will use lichens as nesting material. So the ruby-throated hummingbird, which is our local hummingbird, I will be able to die happy when I see a ruby-throated hummingbird nest because I've seen pictures of it. They form these teeny, tiny little nests, and they're coated in lichens. And I guess they're using them for camouflage, and they're so cute. Have you seen one? Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous. That's awesome. But yeah, they like. It seems like every single time they form a nest, they coat it in lichens, which just seems like absolutely fairy tale adorable to me. Yeah, so lichens, and someone asked earlier about the reindeer that eat lichens. There's a specific type of lichen called a reindeer lichen, and it's in the same genus as the fruticose lichen we just saw, Cladonia. But this one's the Cladonia rangiferina. It makes these like spongy mats that form something like 90% of reindeer and caribou's winter diet when there's not much else growing. They can rely on this lichen, and they'll eat this lichen. They have specific enzymes to be able to digest it, extract some nutrition from it. As far as humans eating lichens, there are some examples of humans eating lichens, whether it be for survival or as a delicacy, like by choice. So one example is the rock tripe lichen, which if you see it, you'll know. It's like, it forms these, they look like dead leaves that are attached to rocks by a belly button in the center. So their genus is Umbilicaria, like umbilical. If you're ever out, like upstate, I've seen it a bunch, and you see just like, why are there so many like dead leaves on this rock and they're not going anywhere? That's rock tripe lichens. They're so cool. But those in certain Asian cuisines, I've heard can get cooked up and are treated as a delicacy. And I have not tried one. I have encountered areas where there have been like enough rock tripe to forage some, but I always just feel like, oh, I don't know. I know how slowly lichens grow. It's like I feel bad taking some, but maybe one day curiosity will get the best of me. There's also a type of lichen that gets used, I hear, in Southeast Asian cooking, or in South Asian cooking in India, in certain curry dishes. The black stone flower can get used and provide like a smoky flavor to some curries. And I actually saw this for sale at a spice shop last year, 2 years ago. I bought it. I brought it home. I didn't cook with it, but I did make a tea with it. I heard that you could make a tea, and it had a long list of potential health benefits that I do not recall. But I did bring this tea to a party for our volunteers in the Discovery Garden, and I can tell you it was one of the least popular things offered at the party. It did not have a lot of fans. I described it earlier as just like drinking the earth, and like not real. I like earthy flavors, but it was like a little too much for me. Little wormwood tea. Yeah, I haven't had wormwood, but it was. I'm sure it's some people's cup of tea, but it was not mine. And then I've heard in like the Pacific Northwest, the Salish peoples will have a long history with the horsehair lichen that grows there, which is called that because it literally looks like it. It looks like these like long strands of hair. And apparently it can get pretty gelatinous and like thick and form almost like a loaf when it's baked. And if anyone's read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, there's a really cool description there. She describes how like they will bake this lichen in like these clay pits underground and make these loaves that are very nutrient dense and like good winter survival food. But yeah, I haven't had too much lichen to eat. But I do see lichens, and I do sometimes think like, wow, I want to like lick it. There are some lichens. Yeah, I'm glad some of you are looking at the lichens here. This like yellow dust looking thing. That's some of the same candle flame lichen we were seeing earlier. The one that kind of looks crustose, but if you get close, it has those foliose leafy lobes going on. I just said I want to lick lichen sometimes, and that actually reminds me about lichen etymology, because I felt that way about lichens before I even knew where lichen comes from. And apparently, does anyone here speak ancient Greek? No? I'd be like, that's so cool. So apparently lichen comes from like the ancient Greek word for to lick. Like it literally comes from to lick, because it's kind of licking the surface, I guess. It licks the surface both in how it adheres to it, and also like, I guess because it's so absorbent, like the way it absorbs water, I guess it was just evocative of this word. But yeah, that's, I think, a very funny thing baked into the word lichen. We're making our way back, and as we do, I just want to share some thoughts on lichens, and also a really sweet quote that I really resonate with from Henry David Thoreau. He wrote, "The lichenist will have the keenest relish for nature in her everyday mood and dress. To study lichens is to get a taste of earth and health, to go gnawing the rails and rocks, a lichenist fats where others starve." And I think that's just so true about being a lichen appreciator, is like you can go out, nothing else is growing, there are no leaves on the trees, and you have so much to look at. You really have so much to look at. And so lichens will change your relationship to winter. They will change your relationship to rainy days. And I think like generally they'll change your relationship to nature and what nature is, what nature can be, because it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, I'm leaving the city and I'm going out into the wild. There are lichens all over the place in our neighborhoods here in New York, thank goodness, over 100 species. So they're really everywhere. I love using a hand lens to look closely at lichens, but you can also just use the naked eye. If I had to make one book recommendation to you all to encourage your urban lichen exploration, it's literally called Urban Lichens. Very easy to remember. This is a guide to urban lichens of the Northeast United States by Jessica Allen and James Lendemer. Really great book that goes into a lot of the species and way beyond the ones that we learned today. with a really great dichotomous key in the back. And yeah, this book was definitely part of my like initial intro to lichens. This is a great book. But yeah, we're making our way back. Oh, thank you so much. This walking backwards thing is really something. I feel like I need like a mirrors in front of me or something. Yeah. The question, yeah.
Just an analogy.
Rachel
Carson wrote a book called The Edge of the Sea,
Mhm.
and she talks about minuscule sea creatures that actually are, like a barnacle that are scraping away at the rocks. And her descriptions, it takes a long time to read the book, but her descriptions are fabulous, and it really reminded me
Of
that
like
analogy you made.
I haven't read any Rachel Carson yet, but it seems like I really gotta get to it. Yeah, for many reasons. Cool. Yeah. Anybody else with any questions or something to share? Yeah.
Can you remind me the names of the two common ones, the yellow-green one and the grayish-blue?
Yeah, so those, you mean just like the names of the chemicals that produce those, or?
Just the names of the lichens. Like, what would you
Those,
call them?
well, the ones that we saw were most likely common green shield lichen, which is Flavoparmelia caparata, and the I think the other one, I haven't been able to get a very close look at it, but I think it was Punctalia rudecta, which is rough speckled shield. And you'll see both of those around New York City a lot. But you'll see a lot of other lichens that also have those colors to them. Like those are just very common lichen colors. Yeah, those like yellow, green, gray, blue. But lichens will come in all colors too. Actually, the first time that I like put lichen goggles on, I was visiting my family in Florida, and I saw these like massive pink circles on the trees, and I had no idea what it was. I think this was my first time hearing the word lichen when I went and looked up like, what am I seeing? And it's called the Christmas lichen, and it was just, they looked like these like pink explosions on the trees. It was so cool. I like ending here because you can see a whole bunch of lichens on the branch of this tree. Tons of lichens. And like all the way up there too. Really cool. I bet also if anyone comes exploring over here after the tour ends, you'll probably find some cool twigs you could take a close look at. Yeah, any other questions?
Just gratitude because
Oh.
it made me feel ecstatic about lichens.
Oh, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's truly all I can hope for is making people ecstatic about lichens. Please share with a friend. I feel like an evangelist when I do this. I'm like spreading the good word of lichens. There's a great blog about lichens that is great because it's great and also great because it's punny. It's called Ways of Enlightenment. I hope everybody has left enlightened. Yeah. And please remember to give back your hand lenses if you have one. We'll be collecting them. You can pass them to me or Karen or Michael. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, I'll hang around with if anyone has any other questions or things to share.
What's your name again?
Isabella. Yeah, it only took me 30 minutes to tell you my name. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Isabella.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.